Dom, I feel like it's been forever. I mean, it's been a long few days, but it's also been just a few days since the election.
I don't know what you're talking about, Jonah. What
I know.
happened?
Well, actually, nothing happened for us. And so, right off the bat, we did not manage to put out last week's episode. And it took me
Yes.
longer than I think it should have to realize that I was experiencing election stress, which I managed to convince myself, on election eve that it'll be fine until
Oh
it wasn't.
boy.
Yeah.
I was gonna say you really were feeding yourself a lot of. Oh
Listen, I
boy.
think a lot of people told themselves on
Yes.
both sides of the aisle what they needed to believe to do whatever it was they needed to do.
I agree.
So we are still going to, I just want to say, we are still going to still bring everybody that episode, that interview that we did. But for right now, we need to talk.
We do.
All right.
Let's get to it, right?
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Jenna,
And I'm Dom, and we're both award-winning journalists.
who've recently been laid off.
Our industry is experiencing a seismic shift, and it's shed a lot of really good journalists.
So where does that leave us? Well, we're definitely laid off.
And we're looking for new jobs, looking for what's left of the industry, and what to do next.
And we're looking at all of it. So if you're a fellow laid off journalist, a working journalist, or someone who admires the craft, we're looking to build community.
Develop new skills, and try to figure out what just happened.
Welcome to Laid Off and Looking. All right, so Dom, since we need to talk, we decided to reach out to a friend of ours, I guess friend of the show, friend of ours, New York Times best-selling author and renowned political journalist, Ellis Henican. Ellis, it's great to have you on the show.
Hey,
Yes.
great to be here. It's hard to separate your friends from the show's
I
friends, from
know.
just people you've known for a long time. Anyway, I think we're all in the category of lucky to be standing. Anyway, it's good to see you guys.
Quite literally, quite literally. And so I guess yeah, starting from the big thing, I guess, is that if we're doing this podcast and we're talking about how the media works, how it doesn't work, etc., what was your take on how the press handled and covered this election that we just had?
Well, boy, as someone who has plenty to say, as you know, over the years about the various imperfections of the media, you might be surprised how cheery I am today.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't believe that the media is to blame primarily. I don't believe that the entire world needs to be redefined. I do think there's some big structural issues that we have been dealing with and need to deal with in some smarter ways, maybe.
It's an understatement.
But we didn't cause this. Let me just be that clear right up front. We did not cause this.
Cool.
Well, what are some ways, Ellis, that you talk about that we could be better? Because I have some, I guess, some opinions about how the journalists have covered this election over the past like year and a half, and even before covering the Biden administration, how it sort of has, put forth this sort of sense that the media is biased towards, against Donald Trump.
Well, thank goodness we have the gift of time in the podcast universe, right? Because these are big and frankly kind of long-winded answers, I'm afraid.
You got to let it breathe.
Um, so let's try it like this. I think we need to start out by talking about what's the purpose here? What's the role of the press? What can we reasonably expect of the media? Which is maybe why I wanted to start with we didn't do this. I
Okay.
don't think that fundamentally media coverage explains where the nation is today. I mean, it's one of many factors in the culture that we all play some role. But I don't think it's that crappy news coverage elected Donald Trump. I don't. I mean, I know there are people who want to argue that, but I don't buy that. So a lot of stuff has happened. Let me start like this. A lot of stuff has happened in the last few years that have dramatically changed how the media operates, what we can expect from it, what its place in the world has been. Most of it has been driven initially by technology, I think. I speak as a guy who spent all his early career in the newspaper business, which I love. I mean, I wish newspapers were just like they were 20 years ago. I mean, I could be writing columns at Newsday until the day I die, and But that world has changed, and mostly because of technology. Ink on paper, thrown on the doorstep, billed by the month. It's not how most people learn about what's going on in the world anymore.
Hmm.
And newspapers failed to adjust quickly enough to that, and consequently have a much more shrinking business. And so all of those platforms have gone to different places. And one of the other things that created at the same time was the opportunity, or maybe the danger, some of both, of folks who can spend all day long consuming media that they agree with and never once hear a discouraging word. I think that's been one of the biggest changes that's happened in the media. It has made us dumber as a nation. It has undermined some of the truths that we shared as Americans. It explains a lot of what's become of the media coverage of politics. And it's had a profound effect on the nation. It turns out that people like to hear things they agree with, and people don't like to hear things they don't agree with. Never before was it possible to live like that, but in the
Hmm.
past decade or two, you can spend all day long consuming media that you agree with all day. It convinces you that everybody, or at least every smart person, agrees with you. It never
Hmm.
taxes your brain. And I think any discussion about political coverage of this race, or even broader political topics has got to start with that reality. Does that make sense?
No, I totally think that makes
Yeah.
sense.
And there we are. I mean, so if you lean left, you can watch MSNBC, or listen to NPR, or find blogs that tell you that you're really smart to feel that way. And if you lean right, you can watch Fox, and listen to Joe Rogan and what's left of talk radio, and right wing blogs. And you know what? And you'll be convinced that any smart person agrees with you, and you'll feel kind of empowered. I mean, I know I was doing, TV hits today on right-wing TV, and boy, they're high-fiving each other. Everybody in the world agrees with them, apparently.
Well, in all fairness, I mean, had the election gone the other way, there totally would have been high-fiving and like celebrations and fireworks and the whole nine. Yeah, no, it's definitely I think everybody has been able to construct their own personal echo chamber of what it is that they want to hear. And so that can give you, I guess, a skewed view or version of your neighbors, your
Yeah, and
community.
no, and you're right. You're right, Jen. It's as true on the left as it is on the right. Most people obviously don't see it as much on their side as they see it on the other side. But
I'm not
but
saying the
but
high fiving would have happened for the same reason over like, yeah, this policy's happening. Like it's very different, but the elation still would have been there
yeah,
on either side.
and the belief that any smart person agrees with me,
Yes.
right? Or any sane person agrees with me. And it's hard to get away from. I mean, there are moments where I feel like that. But it was not previously possible prior to the digitalization and the, segmenting of the media. You couldn't do that. There wasn't enough. But now you can do that all day long. In fact, you almost have to work not to do that today, because we've divided into tribal camps so much, and people hang around with people like themselves because it's more comfortable.
But also, Jen and I talked a few weeks ago about the Gallup poll that came out and just showed how much the public does not trust media. And that goes for both sides of the aisle pretty much. And they just don't trust in us. I guess, you know, we've seen some stuff, pop up. I look at things of like the situation with Joe Biden when the issue when he dropped out, that the question about did the media ignore the question of him not being the best in his best state as a president during the years, and that did they ignore it? Same kind of question came up with Trump too, where people were they ignoring it? Did the media see certain things, sane washing, the
Yes,
fact that
sane washing came up
the
a
whole
lot.
issue of making sense of his long-winded speeches. I mean, where I guess does the media need to like look forward to and how they handle these big questions? Because as polarizing as Trump is, he's not going away. He's coming back. So how do they need to look forward to how they deal with Trump and also with other people who come, well, both sides of the aisle?
Yeah, I mean, I deny the charge if it's that I knew that Joe Biden was a vegetable and I didn't tell anybody. I mean, I don't think I did that. We can argue forever about um, Biden's mental condition, whether things would have been different if he decided not to run for a second term and allowed the Dems to hold a proper primary process and pick whoever it is that came out on top of that and run that person as the candidate. And the same again could be true on the other side. I think people cover that stuff, to the extent that we knew. I mean, none of us really has truly intimate access to either of these candidates at this level. I mean, so much of it is filtered through control and carefully doling out who gets access. And I mean,
But you know,
political operatives have gotten very sophisticated about that. Yes.
yeah, I was just going to say that I've had several conversations with people that have questioned, oh, well, why didn't, first of all, the media, I think we need to unpack what exactly, because that's a huge umbrella. But anyway, why wasn't this reported and why wasn't that said? And I'm just like, you do know that we need verifiable facts, right? Like, we can't just go to press with, like, girl, I heard in the streets. Like, you can't do that. But I wonder if more people are going to spaces and places where they can hear the rumor and then just run with that as fact. Because sometimes when the rumor turns is then verified later on, then it makes it look like in the eyes of some consumers that the news media journalists were behind the eight ball because I
Yeah.
already knew this.
You were hiding it all along. I mean, you ask whether um, the public has lost confidence in the media, and that's certainly true. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I don't think you can deny the polling on that. I mean, you do have to ask, which I think is a question you were hinting at, is what exactly do you mean by the media when you say that? But you also need to put it in context, right? I mean, this is a very grumpy time in our history. People hate everything,
Mm.
right? I mean, the two leading candidates for president both had terrible approval ratings. The nation has a wrong track number that's huge, and it was huge in the previous administration. We don't like any institutions. We don't much like each other. Some days we don't even like ourselves. Um, and so clearly the media is part of that. Um, I think really what it is people like the media they like. All those Rogan listeners think he's pretty smart,
No, they
right?
think he's a genius.
Mhm.
The same way
Right?
I think that what would it be the diagram, the Venn diagram of people who think Rogan's really smart and who think Elon Musk is really smart. I'm thinking is probably just one big circle.
There could be some there could be some overlap there. But I bet you if you did polling, you could find, the fans of Pod Save America, or I mean you pick whoever you like. Um, we like again, we get back to that what I think is a psychological truth, which is we like hearing things we agree with, and we don't like hearing things we don't agree with. I mean, just look at the cable channels today, right? Never a discouraging word is heard on any of them, right? I mean, very, very few lefty voices, a role I once played on Fox. Very little of that on the air today. And on MSNBC, I mean, I don't hear any right-wing voices on MSNBC. And I think the bosses there in both those places recognize that that's what their audience wants to hear. Why give them something that makes them turn it off? Again, I think it makes us dumber as a people. It makes us worse as a country. But I think it's where we are in the media landscape right now.
Okay, but that kind of brings us to the crisis in journalism, which we've also been talking about, which a lot of it has to do with the business model. That the business model, because basically internet, social media has eaten up all of the advertising dollars. Therefore, it's not like people are going to, their local newspaper, et cetera, and seeing those advertisements, which means to be on those platforms and to be able to still get that clickbait or whatever, you almost have to give the public what it wants and maybe not what it needs. Like, I mean, Dom, didn't we have somebody on, and I feel terrible because I'm gonna forget, but basically was saying, no, that our news diet, it was all like, dessert and nobody was eating vegetables anymore because that's boring.
People, though, are going to dinner and they're choosing the ice cream and not the vegetables. And they are now so easily able to access the ice cream, and what I'm talking about is junk,
Yeah.
Mhm.
that they are forgetting to eat the vegetables, the protein, the meat, the healthy diet that we have to have. Our information diet, even as we have more sources than ever, I would say is as unhealthy as it has ever been.
Yeah, listen, I understand those pressures, and you're certainly right about the business model, right? I mean, the news, I know the newspaper business best of all, and classified advertising and retail advertising from a handful of, auto dealers, real estate, help wanted, department stores. I mean, that was the business, right? That's where the money came from, and classified particularly. And it just went away. I mean, Craigslist took that part, and the other places went to digital ads and other places. That said, you got to differentiate a little bit, I think. Um, Medium-sized local news coverage is screwed, and I don't know how it's going to come back. I mean, the business model just makes it so hard, even for medium-sized or semi-large, once great American newspapers. And I'm thinking the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Los Angeles Times, the Chicago Tribune, the Miami Herald, Newsday. I would put in that
Yeah.
category. That sort of level below the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Journal. Pretty much the next tier, which is great. I mean, those companies, they all still exist, but I mean, they don't have remotely have the resources that they once had
But
to
those are
do
the
the kind of
really
work.
big ones, because something else a graphic that I thought was amazing, which was it was a map of the country with the states and how they went, and then overlaid was a map of news deserts, because
Interesting.
a lot of communities, I mean, when you were talking about people not being in an echo chamber, whatever, we were also learning through the podcast that people do trust their local news, and you hear more about your neighbors who you
Yeah.
might like, are problem solving or doing something. But anyway, people seem to be less polarized when they're engaging with their local news and actually trust their local news. But somehow everybody's head has turned towards the national, which of course is a spectacle and is treated like a sport at this point.
No, you're right. Listen, I love local news. I mean, that's, again, I'm being selfish here, but I mean, that's what I came up on, and I love local, and I don't really care, honestly. I don't. It doesn't have to be ink on paper. The digital stuff that's out there, some of it's really good. But I do think, if you get back to the presidential campaign,
Mm-hmm.
there was great coverage of this campaign. I mean, you had to go look for it, and mostly it was at bigger places. But I dare you to have read the Washington Post coverage of the presidential campaign and tell me there wasn't some phenomenal. There was great reporting. Those people did a terrific job, and the New York Times the same way. And I think the TV networks did a good job. And if you were interested in knowing what was happening in the presidential campaign of 2024, you have no one to blame but yourself, because it was there. You just had to read it.
Els, with you mentioned the Washington Post, and while they have been really commended for like a lot of the coverage that they've been doing, just a few weeks ago, Jeff Bezos came out and basically blocked the newspaper's endorsement
Yeah, I
of
know.
a
I
presidential
know.
candidate.
Of
And
Vice President Harris specifically. I mean, I'm pretty
yeah,
sure that was who they were planning on
yeah, it was.
endorsing.
It was. And I guess my thing is, he put out a statement where he was saying how basically looking at, he was looking to, listen, papers need to go back to a space where we're reporting, we're not, basically, we report and you decide. We're going to give you the facts, but we're not here to tell you who to vote for. And it's people have a distrust for the media. And where he was like, we should have done this before, but we did it now anyway. And they caught a lot of flack for that because of the timing of it all. Felt like, it was done because basically a business. People were saying like, it looks like, you're trying to protect the fact that maybe you think Donald Trump's going to win and you don't want to go against him by supporting, you know, Kamala Harris, and therefore you're trying to protect your business. So I guess the question is, like, what responsibility does the media have? Like, we understand endorsements for the most part, people looking to correlate endorsements of a newspaper to a candidate, winning is not really there. We don't know what's there, but isn't there sort of like, I don't know. To me, there was something that felt icky about that. So about a
Hmm.
number of like, I think they said it was three quarters. It was the Neiman Lab that said three quarters of the papers of newspapers did not endorse a candidate. And it just feels kind of like a lot of people are scared about what if Donald Trump wins and we do not want to be on the receiving end of him being pissed at us.
Yeah, so the revenge tour. You don't want to have your
Yeah.
name high on the list for the
No.
revenge tour. I know, I get it. I hated the decision. I mean, and the explanation for it didn't add up to the result. You know, the fact that back in the 70s at some point they didn't used to. I mean,
Yeah.
none of that stuff explains any of this. It's hard not to have the suspicion that you're hinting at, Dom. I know that Bezos's other business enterprises, he felt like he needed to protect them from the wrath of the guy who might become president, and indeed now is going to be the president. That it was a larger business decision.
Mhm.
And I'm very sympathetic to that view. I think that's most likely what happened. It's hard to get inside anybody's heart in that way, but it certainly looks that way to me. So around the country, there are examples, and the Washington Post is the most prominent, but not the only, of billionaires buying newspapers, right? These papers that were owned by big chains or by hedge funds, and some billionaires have come in. The LA Times is another example. Um, and by and large, it's been a good thing. I mean, I don't love it, because you have the problems like you described, where these people come with other business concerns that then spill into the pages of the newspaper. By and large, they've been, beneficial owners. But boy, this is an example of where they want. The thing I didn't like the campaign to cancel your subscription. I mean, I understand people being pissed off, but go cancel your Amazon Prime subscription if you want. And apparently, a couple of 100,000 people yanked their Washington Post subscriptions, and that's a bad thing for all of us. It's bad for the Post. It's bad for the talented journalists. They're doing great work there. It doesn't hurt Bezos.
Yeah, I think a lot of
Please
people
don't
are just
do
like,
that. Don't do
not
that.
making his money here.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. I hope people who did it are now thinking better because, and again, the truth is, there's a ton of great coverage in that paper, and I want them to have more money, not less money.
I mean, listen, that makes perfect sense to me. I will say when it comes to endorsements though, it was, I don't know, maybe 24 hours later that Bezos did tweet his congratulations. So Twitter reacted with like, "Oh, there's the endorsement."
Yeah. Yeah. Also, by the way, one other piece before you get off it, because it's a great topic. Newspaper readers have understood for a long time the difference between opinion coverage and news coverage. Newspapers have maintained that, pretty well. Now, some creeps in, and you can criticize it from time to time, but the editorial page. I mean, I've worked on newspapers where the editorial page took positions I didn't like, and you say, "Hey, listen, that's the owner. That's not us." Go talk to the owner. I don't know. It didn't seem like that much of a problem to me that needed to be cured.
Well, I mean, that I think makes perfect sense. Dom, what were you going to say?
Yeah. No, I agree. I guess it just, you feel kind of like, again, what would bother me was just also how I prefer if people are truthful about what their decisions, what's behind their decisions. And I hate when people try to sort of gaslight you into thinking that no, it's not about that. It's not about it. Just and because you can actually make a good case
to the reason behind the curtain.
Just tell me the truth. And I think that goes back to why people then feel like they can't trust media. They feel like because in the end, you just sort of feel like, well, he's making the decisions that he wants anyway. So therefore, you're not really getting the truth. And I think that's, again, it goes back to having that relationship with your readers or the people who are following your news reports. It's like I know what you're saying about, I think it is a bummer that 250,000 people dropped their subscription, but I think there probably were a number of people who were really hurt by that, feeling like there was some kind of trust broken there, even if it wasn't the reporters. And I get it. You could hurt him in other ways financially, but I think he is signed on as the owner of the newspaper. So therefore, that's what people immediately go to. So I kind of get it. I think that hopefully they do sign back up, but it did hurt that relationship.
Yeah, yeah. Although again, it's another example of people wanting to hear what they already agree with.
True.
I mean, it's like I want the owner of the newspaper that I read to share my political outlook. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's so healthy. I just, judge the coverage by whether the coverage is any good or not.
Do you think it's always been that way though? I mean, is that something? Because I mean, I'm trying to really think to a time where I don't really know, to tell you the truth, if that was an expectation that people always expected to agree with the news that was coming at them, or is that something that has just evolved over time? Is this something that became worse or just became more focused on over the past like 10 years?
Well, yeah, it's certainly intensified. I mean, I don't think it just got invented in the last
No.
in the last 10 years, but I don't know if you've seen this a terrific new history of the New York Post that Susan Mulcahy and
Oh
Frank
yeah.
DiGiacomo put out, the Paper of Wreckage,
Yeah.
which I think is a great title.
Yeah.
And it tells the story of Murdoch's purchase and all the changes that went in at the New York Post. And Rupert Murdoch has a very clear political outlook, and I don't tend to agree with it that much, but a lot of people do. And he produced a product that some people liked and some people didn't like, and that's like goes back to the really the 70s and 80s, I guess. So I don't know. It's probably there's always probably been some version of it, but man, we sure are tribal today. And as I said at the start, the technology enables us to live in these bubbles more comfortably than we once did, and I hate that.
Well, speaking of being tribal,
Sure.
leading to my next question, no, because and first of all, want to again be clear, there's reporting, there's analysis news, and there's opinion news. And so now, of course, immediately what happens after an election is, start doing the postmortems, also getting the exit poll questions to voters, etc. And in both cases, I have seen very few instances, maybe one or two, where people have kind of touched on it as like a side thing, but didn't really address what role, if any, gender and race played in this campaign. And for me, as a Black woman, although if you're watching this on YouTube, you already know that. Anyway, but to completely just sort of ignore those two factors as if they're non-issues in a campaign feels incredibly disingenuous to me. And I wonder if and maybe it's just a question of the journalists who are still working and who's out there thinking even to ask the questions, or who's giving these assignments and being like making sure you touch on this question, but just leaving that out feels very, very weird to me, because here we had like what would have been a historic election, and now when it didn't happen, we don't even talk about the two things that would have made it historical.
Yeah, it's a great set of questions. Let's try to unpack them. First of all, you're not going to find the answers in polls. Nobody is ever going to tell a pollster in the 21st century that the reason they didn't vote for a candidate was gender, race. People just won't say that.
Yeah.
No matter they could be, the most racist, sexist, misogynist person you've ever met, and they're not going to tell that to a pollster, right? So I don't think you're going to find the answer in exit polls.
Mm-hmm.
That said, I mean, I believe, and there's some of this is susceptible to reporting, I guess, that it plays a big role. I mean, that we've now had two campaigns, particularly the woman thing. I think, we've had
twice.
two. Yeah, it's happened. It's 0-2 so far. That doesn't. I guess that
Oh,
doesn't
and
prove
two
it.
for America.
Doesn't prove it, but it's something. It ain't nothing. Um, and it's the role that plays. Now, it's gotten really complicated because one of the political achievements of the third Trump campaign was that he began to break the Democrats' grip on African American voters, especially on Latino voters, and particularly males in both categories. And that's big. I mean, I don't know if it's just a Trump thing, if that's something that's going to dribble out to other Republican candidates, but it never happened before, or at least not for many, many, many years. It did happen this time, at least to some extent. And man, that's a really important question that I don't think we know the answer to yet.
Well, when it comes to, I guess, pontificating or wondering or whatever on a political campaign, I mean, first of all, sometimes I wonder if, 24 hours, 48 hours, I understand there's a news cycle to be fed, but is that too soon? Because the information hasn't really had a chance to be digested enough to give that full analysis to your readers or your watchers of actually we've had a chance to really think about it and report on it, etc. Here's what most likely happened.
Yes, it's too soon, but too bad. I mean, you got 24 hours a day to fill on TV, and you got, a newspaper coming out now many times a day because of the
Yeah.
digital aspects of it. I mean, yeah, it's definitely too soon, and maybe the stuff we say now will look stupid when you look back on it. But I would say it is ever thus in the media. Like people do not wait, and the speed of it's only gotten. We used to live essentially in a 24-hour news cycle, and now we don't. I mean, we don't even really have a news cycle anymore. It's just now.
It's instantaneous. Yeah.
Now is the news cycle, right?
Now. It's depressing.
Ellis, we touched on this earlier, but I did want to like dive in a little deep, a little bit more into it. We were talking about how there were a number of reporters who actually went for election night that were denied any kind of access to Donald Trump's, I guess, to his event that he was holding at Mar-a-Lago. And they basically said, I'm looking over here, there was Puck's political correspondent, Tara Palmieri, and campaign co-chair, Chris Lasavita. I don't know if I might have jacked up that name.
Yeah, well, you did great. That's it.
And he tweeted that she was denied credentials to enter Mar-a-Lago to cover the election night due to her proclivity to write bullshit. Well. And I guess it's like it gets you thinking about, and she wasn't the only one. There were a number of other reporters who were denied because of pieces that they had written about Trump. And I guess the question is, how are journalists going to sort of navigate this? Because it's obviously, he's also gone on the record of wanting, talking about mentioning things about investigating some reporters for treason, losing licenses.
Jailing people.
Exactly. You know what I mean? Like there seems to be, the media has become a really favorite target for the administration, for Trump and for the administration. And so how do they go about navigating this?
It's a real question. You got to separate the trivial from the real, I think. If you don't get invited to the victory party, you wear that as a badge of courage. You say, my stories must have been so good they can't stand to have me there. Right. And, somebody else will be there. And that's amateur hour for a political campaign or an operative in a political campaign to say, nah, you're not going to come because you wrote a mean story. I mean, that is not how self-confident people behave. That's how twits behave. But that doesn't really matter because who cares what happened at the event at Mar-a-Lago. Now, if you're trying to block people from information that they have a right to, Trump has made all kind of threats. You're right, including some, that are right up against the edge of violence. Saying it would be fine if people shot through the media, or saying I want to revoke the license of NBC or CBS. CBS because I didn't like the way. That's exactly right. Because I didn't like the way they edited a segment in 60 Minutes. I mean, now I think that's probably an idle threat, but I guess I don't really know. I mean, it's the kind of thing they could try, and that would be outrageous, and we would have to fight that, with every fiber of our being. Politicians don't get to decide who covers them. Government officials don't use content to decide who gets a license to operate on the public airwaves. I mean, that stuff is, that's dictator stuff.
Well,
and
I mean,
if
in all fairness,
they try to do that, we got to fight it. What?
I said, in all fairness, day one. That's what he said.
That's so. I mean, it's very difficult at this early point. You're talking about the early blush of history, Jenna. To know which of the things they're going to try, which were just idle talk, which they will succeed at, which they will fail at. I would point out, and this is a little bullet point I've been using, the three biggest things that Donald Trump said he was going to do as president in 2016, he did not do. He tried and failed in all three cases, right? To build a wall and make Mexico pay for it, eliminate and replace Obamacare, and reverse the federal deficit. He made no progress on any of those things. They were total and complete failures, and they were the three main things he ran on. So, let's see.
Oh,
let's see.
totally. Let's see. I will say though that this time around, let's see. One, he's before he had no experience in government. This time, I
Yep,
can't even
true,
believe he's saying that.
true.
He's had one job in government as president. That's one. Two is that a lot of the people who were acting as guardrails,
Yep,
at least as
yep,
we know right now, are not in the inner circle. Now, I've
very
been
true.
hearing reporting that there is a movement among, I guess, maybe some sort of like closeted log cabin, not log cabin. Oh my God, that's a terrible way to put it. Closeted log cabin Republicans. That came out wrong. Um, Lincoln, no, what was the Lincoln Project, right?
Lincoln
Lincoln
Project.
Okay, there
Project.
we go. Lincoln Project. So closeted Lincoln Project Republicans, because these would be people who weren't open about their anti-Trump views, which would of course keep them barred, had them, but just didn't make a big deal about them. And that for them to try to get hired into this administration to try to provide some guardrails, because what at least I have seen is that the sycophants tend to lean a little bit more like they're internet trolls, for lack of a better description. Like it's not about government, it's not about public service, it's just about dunking on the libs, like
Hmm.
doing whatever it is that I want. So if you staff a government, like a cabinet, with those individuals, then are the guardrails really there? And then you add on the fact that with some hindsight, there's a better understanding. If we want to do crazy stuff before the midterms, we got to do it all now.
Oh, you're completely right about that. I mean, at the very, I think maybe the answer is we don't know how far it's going to go,
Exactly.
but it's going to go in that direction. I mean, clearly, it's not going to be General Kelly. Isn't going to be the chief of staff next time.
Mm-mm.
It's going to be, somebody who's not saying no very often.
If at all.
And that seems to be one of the lessons they learned from the first time is you can put yes people in here who will do what you want. And you're right. You're right. I mean, it's alarming, I would say.
But, it kind of goes to this whole thing of how the media represents the Trump administration moving forward. Because a lot of times it's about, are there, do they have enough? There was this really good piece by Brian Stelter on CNN where, he asked this question, like, are there enough, like, people who can represent the administration? And then what does that necessarily mean? Because sometimes, as we've seen, some of those commentators are truly come out with extremist sayings that are
Trolls.
problematic.
There was one that just got banned
Yep.
from CNN for
Right.
being out of pocket. And I'm certain for him in his world, that was a badge of honor. I've been banned from CNN because I'm so like, how do you engage with a political it's not even a movement anymore. I mean, we're talking about an administration where, again, it's entirely plausible that either people who are spokespeople or people who are leading cabinets, whatever, or we'll see how the House settles out. Because as of right taping time, it hasn't been completely settled. If someone like MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene, gets a bigger platform, she also is known for saying incendiary things just to say it and to get a rise out of the left. How do you engage in a meaningful conversation with somebody who does that?
Yeah, there are ways to do it. I mean,
Oh my God, I'm all ears.
I don't buy the premise. Listen, Jen. I mean, half of Americans just voted for Donald Trump for president, right? I mean, of those people who voted.
51%, yeah.
So it can't be. It can't be. And maybe I say this as a guy from Louisiana, so it's easier. It's easier for me to say this because I've got relatives who fit into this category. It can't be that 51% of Americans are all crazy people. I don't believe that.
Mhm.
Obviously we have some differing outlooks and some differing values about certain stuff, but they're not all crazy. There are people in that whatever million strong that you can have an intelligent conversation with, and they may disagree with you, but I mean, I wish both sides were more open to that. When I go do my right-wing TV stuff, I go on with people, and I certainly get social media responses from viewers like this
Mm-hmm.
that people just they can't tolerate the fact that I breathe air.
Oh my
Mhm.
That someone would have those horrible views that I express. I think I'm expressing them pretty intelligently.
Well, I
Um,
totally agree that we should be having conversations with people of differentiating political opinions and life experiences and points of view. I absolutely agree with that. But how to
where are we
have,
going to find them? Where are
yeah,
we going to
there you
find them?
go.
Is
How
that
do
the
you do?
question?
Yes,
Yeah, maybe we honestly, listen, I sympathize with you because, you should see some of the folks I get paired with sometimes. Um, but I think that's a little, maybe you got to work a little harder, but we can
Okay.
find them. I think I do not believe that, whatever it is, half of 300 and something million people are all idiots or all crazy people. We just gotta work harder to find them. I mean, we have the additional problem that we were talking about at the beginning, which is that where are we going to host them? Is MSNBC going to put them on the air? Is Fox going to put a bunch of libs on the air? I don't know. I think that goes against their business model at this point. But I'd sure like there to be some place we could talk with each other.
I think it's necessary.
Well, and also talk to each other constructively, because I feel like so often a lot of these formats are all about, who gets, saying, topping what the other person is saying, being
Yeah.
truly just combat. I think, listen, I've come from the cable world, and it, you always loved when you had this energy of people yelling at one another, but then you kind of just lose where the middle ground is. People are so extreme that you forget most people really, from many issues, when you talk to them, you're trying to find that middle ground. And I think a lot of people, you're not going in with a conversation. You're just going in there with, I'm right, you're wrong, and that's it. So
Yeah.
how does that serve the public if that's what you're
Uh,
giving them?
that is a tough one. You're absolutely right. The media conversation reflects the national conversation, right? I
Mm.
mean, people in a diner are no better at it than people on CNN are. And so I do think it is a broader cultural reality. If you want optimism, here's the optimistic thing, is that when you talk to people across all those lines, and you just talk to them, they're great. Right? I mean, I had my liberal friends in New York tell me, oh, they ran into somebody and they were a Trumper, but damn, the person was like really nice. He helped me, lent me some jumper cables when my battery ran out. I mean, there is still an awful lot of, human connection out there when you get outside of the realm of partisan politics. And so maybe the answer in those conversations is to try to start with the other stuff. We do share a lot of values. I mean, people care about their families. They want people to have opportunities and to have good, happy lives and good careers and safe communities. And, I mean, when you get past the sloganeering, there is still a lot of stuff that people do, I think, have a lot of shared perspective on if we can shut up and listen to each other long enough.
I do think that we do, but I will say that at least from what I can tell, a shocking number of people subscribe to, I guess, um, a dessert-based sort of economy or something, or in terms of a dessert-based value system. And by dessert-based, I mean pie. If you get a slice of pie from a
Mhm.
pie that I consider that it's all mine, well, now I have less pie, and I don't want you to have that pie. I mean, literally, it seems also there's an element of that in there because there's a whole lot of like, no, this is mine, so stay away.
So let's stick with your analogy, and
The
let's make the
pie.
pie. Let's
We
make the
all like
pie.
pie.
Let's make the pie a pumpkin pie. Okay.
Okay.
Let's talk about Thanksgiving.
Oh boy.
Okay. All across America, we're speaking right now, people will
Yep.
soon be gathering at Thanksgiving tables with
Whew,
with
thoughts
with
and
relatives. Now,
prayers to my white friends.
am I already giving you shivers? And they're going to be some extended families out there. I know you got some cousins and stuff, right?
Yeah.
And they don't all share the same political outlook. They probably didn't all vote the same way. So I mean, let's think about that for a second. How are we going to behave at Thanksgiving dinner, right? I mean, certainly the first instinct that I think most, sane people have is, man, let's don't get into politics at Thanksgiving dinner, right? Can we please talk about football? Can we please talk about, what the kids are doing? Can we talk about the new house that somebody got? Or let's go make fun of somebody's new boyfriend or something. I mean, anything but politics. Um, but I don't know. Maybe there's some ways to talk about that if you do it in the right kind of open-minded way. Are you guys thinking about that?
Well, I mean, it hasn't I mean, listen, from my lived experience, and it's a combination of not just being an African American, but also growing up in a college town that, yeah, well, like everybody, sure, there's enough pie for everybody. There's as long as we all get a slice, it's good. We can slice it even a little bit thinner, and then we got some other desserts so you can still fill up on sweets if you want. Like that's been my lived experience. I am not really familiar with the world where just like I am eating the entire pie and I don't want you to have any. But I will say that a lot of behavior that I've seen, especially in the voting booth, seems to communicate that.
I don't
I
know.
don't know.
Dom, what you got?
I think, listen, I have people I know who have a certain, we don't agree on the issues, but at the same point, I think those who I'm really close to, which is there aren't that many who I'm really that if I don't agree with them, I honestly just don't talk about it because the little I have talked about, I've seen that there's no changing of opinion, and that's tough for me because there are just I have certain boundaries, I have certain issues that are just non-discussion points for me, and it's like, and if people just disagree with me on it, it's like, okay, I just never noticed it to be like as what I see right now over the past 10 years. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Going back to like
Hmm.
2015, 2016, that's when it all started. And it became kind of like all or nothing. And it's difficult sometimes because obviously they hear mine. I'm trying to explain myself of where my opinion is. And they're just like, yeah, but you don't, that's not true. And it's sort of like, honestly, it even goes to what we're talking about in terms of journalism about how people, what is, people believing misinformation, disinformation, you know what I mean? Like people believing things that they just want to believe because of the fact that it suits their candidate. I know for me, listen, I've worked for conservative and I've worked for what some might call liberal media. And I have, I know who I am. And it's like, it was interesting working for a conservative place that I didn't always agree with the political perspective, but I knew at that time I was able to do a job and do a journalist job of being able
I
to
love
present the
it.
facts.
I love it. That's
That to
great
me is important. I mean,
and
that's how I
rare.
met you, though, because it's like, because that to me is so important that you could work for people that you don't necessarily agree with and having those conversations. But there definitely has to be respect. And I always felt like I was respected in those instances. And when I felt like it wasn't, then it's like, okay, then I'm okay to like move on or not have that conversation or just not deal with those people because I do think it has to be. But that's always been important. Maybe because I come from an Italian family that kind of grew up a little bit on the conservative side, but at the same point, I think more fiscally in terms of that stuff. But
Hmm.
in terms of myself, it's like I probably associate more with a liberal stance. And therefore, it just, for me, I've learned to kind of navigate both worlds and be like, okay, I could hear you. But again, it's long as it's respectful. And I think that's what I've noticed with certain, the current climate, it feels very different that you don't have that.
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. And you know what? In those life lessons, maybe there's some media lessons too.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Which, first of all, you're right. It's very difficult to change anybody's mind on the kind of culturally driven political questions of today. Jenna, there is no argument that somebody can make that would make you love Donald Trump, right? I mean, let's be honest, it's not. They could give you every fact, every statistic, every, iron argument. That's not going to happen.
No,
Um,
I don't see how that's even
because it
plausible.
flows out of values and culture and
Yeah.
experience I mean, it's not susceptible to argument, really.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And the same is true in the other direction with with your most MAGA neighbor or colleague or a friend, whatever. But that said, there's still a bunch of room, and here's what I think the room is. First of all, follow Dom's example of wherever you are in the media, do a great job. write great stories, hold yourself to high standards, let the work speak for itself. Don't feel like you're there carrying somebody's political agenda, saying, listen, I'm going to write great stuff, or I'm going to pull together great segments that are going to be compelling television or wonderful column. And you know what? People will react to them as they do. It's all I can do is produce great work, and I can't be held responsible for the way everybody reacts to it. I mean, I think that's one model. Another model is to find those things that we can get people to agree on. And there are a lot of things that cut against across partisan political lines. I mentioned a couple earlier, about our communities being good and people having opportunities and people being safe in their lives and respected for the personal choices they make. Most people agree with that kind of stuff. You got to be pretty much of a nut not to feel like, hey, listen, people make lifestyle choices and they have a right to make their own damn choices, and we ought to leave them alone about it. I mean, that's probably an 80% agreement issue these days. And that people of a variety of genders and races all deserve, equal opportunity. I mean, you can get most people to sign on to that kind of stuff today, even if they're not 100% consistent about it. So as we do our media work, I think those are at least a couple of places to focus, even if the hour seems dark and the world seems divided and the mission seems hopeless. I mean, that's stuff you can actually do that I think is good. I think is good. And this is where I'll end my sermon. You do have to remember that none of this stuff is forever, right? 4 years ago, Donald Trump was left for dead after 9/11, right? Democrats all hated him. Most sane Republicans say this guy's got no future. They were denouncing him. His own current soon-to-be vice president was saying he was not worthy of any public office again. And you know what? I'm not saying the change was good, but man, it was dramatic. So whatever we thinking today is probably going to be really different in a little while.
Well, I will agree definitely because as I was reminding one of my students, as of again our taping time, it's been like 48 hours. But real quick question, when you said, did you mean 9/11 or January 6th?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm at
Oh my
January
God,
6th.
because I
Yes.
honestly was just
Did
like,
I
did
say
I miss a
9/11? I'm
story?
Yes.
sorry.
I really thought I was like, I missed a
No,
story.
no, no. My crises are all colliding into each other. I'm sorry. I was on such an emotional roll there. I'm subbing the wrong case.
And
Sorry
that's why
about
I
that.
didn't want to jump in
Thank
like I
you.
normally
Thank you.
would, but I was just like, he's got to mean January 6th unless I miss
Yeah, no,
something
no,
huge.
January 6th. No, no,
Okay.
January 6th. Some of those people weren't even born on 9/11.
Oh, that's a different kind of sobering. Okay. So well, not really last question, but close to last. So one of the things that now that I guess the election's said and done, we're hearing a lot of, and even Brian Seltzer from, I don't know, is he with CNN now?
Yeah, he's back at
Seltzer, yeah.
CNN.
Oh, he's
Yeah.
back. Okay, all right. I didn't know if he
Yeah.
was back in the payroll. Anyway, so he published a piece saying that Trump's return to power raises serious questions about the media's credibility. And we're talking everything from the discussion around, the red wave when the election results were coming in. I tried to console a lot of people with the concept of the red wave. I think even Dominic, I was texting you like, no, 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 no,
She
no.
did.
Yeah, okay. So that was something that was coming out first. And then there's also that the people are now saying that the corporate media industrial complex is dead. And I'm guessing that's a combination of the way people feel about quote unquote mainstream media and what they feel they got right, or more importantly, what they got wrong. Obviously, the mass exodus of subscribers from the Washington Post, I think all of that fits in with that. But yeah, I guess like basically the big thing, and I think there's a quote from Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire, who was on Twitter, because everybody's on Twitter. I'm still calling it Twitter. Anyway, uh, he was saying that the ability of the corporate media, for lack of a better description, but the ability of them to set the narrative has been destroyed. Donald Trump basically declared war on the media in 2016, and tonight he vanquished them completely. They will never be relevant again. Is that an emotional response, or does he have a point?
It's overwrought. I would say these are perilous times for anyone in the media, but I would also say not dead yet. Listen, when people denounce the corporate media, mostly what they mean is they don't like media that says things they don't agree with.
Mhm.
And I don't think it matters who owns it, whether it's big or little. People don't like things they don't agree with, and today they're able to, to live in that bubble. So I don't know. I mean, they'll still be we still need to know what's going on in the world. People will find ways to deliver it to us. Hopefully, some of us will find a way to continue to make a living doing that. But it will probably be harder, sure.
So, Ellis, our last question we always ask everyone is, how did they become a journalist? What led you to journalism?
You mean, is that what I am? I'm still deciding some days. I
I'm
mean,
questioning my life choices behind
right?
it.
What the hell was I thinking? But it's been a while. Yes. Here's the truth. I mean, I can give you let me give you the truthful answer. So I grew up in a big, loud family in New Orleans, of lawyers, political people, drinkers, storytellers, sitting around the kitchen table on Jefferson Avenue. We told stories. That's what we did, right? And you got points if the story was funny. Which was good if the story was true, but a little exaggeration was permitted here and there. And there was a certain amount of intellectual one-upsmanship, and that was the thing that I guess I was most comfortable with. I did not realize at the time that was job training, right? Eventually, I like to write, and I started working on school papers and that sort of thing. And everyone else in my family pretty much were lawyers. My father, grandfather, uncles, brothers. I'm the first male in 3 generations in the Henican family not to be a lawyer. And I always told myself, well, if this writing thing doesn't work out, I guess I could always go to law school. And I told myself that for a couple of decades. I think that ship has sailed by now. And frankly, I have a more fun life than most of them do. I mean,
You do.
I've gotten to do great stuff. I've been all over the place. I've met
Meet
all
all
kind of
kinds of people.
cool people. I get to hang out with you guys. You didn't have some boring lawyer on here today, did you? And so that's really, there was no bright light moment that I said, this is what I want to do. I started doing it. I like doing it. I came up to New York to go to graduate journalism school. And that was kind of a moment, where I was making sort of a commitment. And I started working on little papers, and then got to big papers, and then realized talking was easier than writing. And, now I do it all. So my career plan these days is just keep saying yes, and hope I can keep it going for a good long while, since I have absolutely no other marketable skills at this point. Does that answer your question?
No, that's a sobering reality.
That's where it is in my head. I don't know
Just
if that's
keep
maybe
saying
more
yes.
to it than that.
And I think that's
yes.
excellent advice for any new and upcoming journalists. Yeah, say yes, man.
Don't be too picky. Just start doing it. And it is really, seriously. I mean, it's been a tough, and you guys have been in the middle of this stuff, obviously. In some ways it sucks as a career, but it's also been really great. I mean, I feel very fortunate, and the waters are a little perilous right now, but I think there's still room for smart, talented people in it, and there's a lot of redefinition, a reinvention. I feel like I reinvent myself every 2 or 3 weeks. But I don't know. I feel very grateful for it.
Awesome. Well, Ellis, I mean, listen, it's always a pleasure to be
I
able to
love
talk
hanging
to
out
you.
with you guys. You all are my favorites. No, seriously, I'll conspire with you in any medium, wherever it is you go. I'm too old to work naked, but pretty much anything other than that, I'll do with you.
Okay, so no
OnlyFans.
So I don't know if I can,
Jenna.
I don't know what you're scheming on, but I'm not doing any porn. But anything other than that,
we're not there yet, but we'll see what happens with the economy and the new tariffs. So.
Anything other than that, I'm up for. It's really great. Always great to see you guys. I really appreciate you having me, particularly at this very dicey moment.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Same here,
Ellis.
Ellis.
All right. Yeah. See y'all later. Catch you later. Bye-bye.
Laid Off and Looking is an independent podcast conceived of and created by Jenna Flanagan and Dominic Camia. Music provided by Jay Cowett, research by Lori Ruthenbucker. Reach out to us anytime at laidofandlookingpod@gmail.com. New episodes drop every Friday at noon.